My husband texted me, "I want a divorce," while he was on a business trip. I stared at those words as they popped up on my phone during breakfast, just after I fed the dog and made myself a cup of coffee. No warning, no argument, just 7 words that ended 27 years of marriage. And before I could even process what was happening, I checked our retirement account. It was empty. My name is Elaine Matthews. I am 50 years old, and here's how it all went down. I met Daniel when I was 22. He was already working as a project manager for a mid-sized construction company in Minneapolis. I had just started my first job as a junior accountant at a manufacturing firm nearby. We met at a networking event I almost skipped. He asked if I liked red wine, and 8 months later we were married. We bought a modest 2-bedroom house in the suburbs, adopted a Labrador named Bear, and promised each other we would build a life better than what our parents had. At the time, it all felt like the dream. Daniel was charismatic, the kind of man people trusted easily. He always had a way with words and could talk his way into anything or out of trouble if needed. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one. Methodical, practical. I handled the bills, tax filings, insurance, and our monthly budgeting spreadsheets. He used to call me the CFO of our marriage. I wore that like a badge of honor. For years we made it work. We were not wealthy, but we lived comfortably. In our late 30s, Daniel went through a career slump. His company downsized and he was let go. I supported us both during that time with my accounting job. He was out of work for almost a year. I never once complained. I picked up extra hours, cut down on non-essentials, and adjusted our investment strategy so that we could keep our retirement plan on track. Eventually, he got hired by a larger firm that sent him on projects around the country. That's when the travel started. At first, I did not mind. I had my work, my garden, my books. Bear was still around then, and I liked my quiet routines. Daniel would be gone for a week or 2 at a time, sometimes a month if the job was big. He always called every night, always sent a picture of whatever hotel he was in. We even joked once that he had stayed in more Hampton Inns than he could count. Still, I never doubted him. He was my husband, my partner. We had weathered so many storms together that I just assumed we were solid. About 4 years ago, I started teaching part-time at the local community college. Basic financial literacy, budgeting, and retirement planning. It gave me purpose. Many of my students were women going through transitions, single mums, recent divorcees, older women coming back to the workforce. I felt useful helping them understand the systems I had spent my life working in. I always told them, protect your financial future first. I just never thought I would have to take my own advice. Daniel had a habit of dismissing my caution. Whenever I triple-checked our tax returns, he would say I was overthinking. Whenever I reminded him to keep receipts or use the joint card for big purchases, he would roll his eyes. But I let it go. I chose to believe that he simply trusted me so much that he did not feel the need to worry. We had built up a decent nest egg over the years, close to $750,000 in retirement savings, split between mutual funds, a small annuity, and a 401k rollover from Daniel's old job. All carefully managed, with low risk and high transparency, or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were there. 6 months before the text, Daniel asked if I had ever thought about what would happen if one of us died suddenly. I said yes, the paperwork is in the safe. The accounts are named. He just nodded. That was it. 3 months before the text, he stopped asking me to review his expense reports, said it was handled by his company's system. I trusted him. 2 weeks before the text, he brought home a new watch, said it was a gift from a client. I looked it up later. It retailed at over $3,000. I asked if he had a receipt. He laughed and changed the subject. Then came the business trip. He said it was in Arizona. Something about a new development contract. 5 days, maybe 7. He left on a Monday morning, kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't wait up, it might run long." By Wednesday morning I got the text, and that was when everything started to fall apart, or rather, everything started to come into focus. The text stunned me, but it didn't shatter me. Maybe that's because something in me had already begun to suspect this wasn't out of nowhere. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, rereading the message while my coffee went cold. Then I opened our joint banking app, the retirement account we had spent nearly 3 decades building. Zeroed out. A withdrawal for the entire balance had been processed in 2 parts over the previous 24 hours. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat, but I didn't panic. I opened my ledger, the Excel sheet I kept updated monthly, and began tracing every number. I matched dates. I pulled statements. I looked for anything I might have missed. I was not emotional. I was auditing. And what I saw made one thing clear. This had been premeditated. 3 months prior, Daniel had begun consolidating some of his old accounts. He said he was trying to simplify things before we retired. I thought that was a good idea. I even helped him set up online access and secure email verification. What I didn't realize was that he was using that process to reroute authorization controls. He changed some joint settings, he reclassified a few accounts. I saw it now in the paperwork. Then there was that new credit card that arrived 2 months ago. Daniel said it was a corporate card from his firm, but it came to our home. When I asked him why, he said the office messed up the address. I let it go. I always let it go. But what bothered me most in hindsight were the questions. Subtle at first. He'd ask how quickly money could be moved between accounts, how long a wire transfer typically takes, whether early withdrawal penalties still applied if you were separating assets due to divorce. At the time, I assumed it was idle curiosity. Looking back, he was testing the water. He was preparing his exit. 1 week before his trip, I came home to find him shredding old tax documents. He said he was cleaning out the cabinet. I told him I usually archived everything in the garage. He just shrugged. When I checked later, several years of files were gone. That included records from the year I covered all our expenses after he was laid off. Gone. Then there were the calls he took outside, the new passwords I wasn't told, the phone set to Do Not Disturb when he was home. I don't know why I didn't push harder. Maybe because after 27 years you don't expect to be lied to. Maybe because I didn't want to believe he could turn on me like that. But the signs were all there. The distance, the vague answers, the sudden interest in finances he never cared about before. One of the last things he said before leaving was, "You'll be fine, Lane. You've always been the smart one." I thought he was trying to be sweet. Now I realize he was just closing a door. He thought I would be blindsided, that I would be broken. He was counting on the fact that I loved him too much to fight back. What he forgot was that I had spent my entire adult life learning how to track numbers that didn't add up. He forgot that I had helped dozens of women rebuild after losing everything. He forgot who he was married to. The Elaine he remembered, the trusting one, the accommodating one, was gone the moment I saw that account balance at 0. Something else replaced her, someone precise, deliberate, and very, very patient. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to argue with a man who had already made up his mind. No, I was going to let him think he had won. Let him think I was too stunned to respond. Let him keep digging. Because what Daniel didn't know was that I was already laying the groundwork to make sure this story ended very differently than he had planned. The first thing I did was contact our financial advisor. Not to confront her, but to ask for a complete report of all recent account activities tied to our retirement funds. I told her Daniel and I were re-evaluating some options, and I needed to compare current structures. She didn't suspect anything. Within an hour, I had a 20-page PDF detailing every move he made. The pattern was clear. 2 months earlier, Daniel had initiated partial rollovers into what appeared to be individual IRAs. One was in his name. The other was in the name of someone I had never heard of, Catherine Bell. I Googled her immediately. Nothing came up on LinkedIn, nothing local, but a reverse search on her email revealed a small real estate LLC in Arizona, registered 6 months ago. It had one listed employee, Catherine. That same LLC had received 2 direct transfers from our joint accounts, one totaling $65,000. I sat still, staring at the screen. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a full-blown financial extraction. Daniel wasn't leaving me. He was liquidating me. I checked our mortgage, still in both names, but the last 3 payments were made from a different account I had never seen before. I requested a property history report and saw that a pre-listing inquiry had been submitted for our house just 3 weeks ago through a real estate agent in Phoenix. We didn't live in Phoenix. We had never discussed selling. But Daniel was trying to move our assets into a jurisdiction I had no legal ties to. It was almost professional in how cold and calculated it was. But here's the thing. I had seen worse. I had worked on forensic audits. I had untangled the lies of failed business partners. Daniel wasn't smarter than me. He just assumed I would never look. And so I looked deeper. I found out that the new business trip was only partially legitimate. His company did have a project in Arizona, but Daniel wasn't officially on the team. I checked the flight receipts. He had used reward miles ones we earned together. He booked a hotel under his name for one night and another under D. Bell for the rest. Catherine Bell, no doubt. I reached out to a contact I had in the bank's fraud department, a former student of mine now working in internal risk. I told her what I suspected, and she quietly confirmed that several transfers from Daniel's account had triggered internal reviews, but had not yet been flagged as official fraud. She couldn't give me details, but her voice dropped when she said, "You're going to want to look into a second layer of transfers involving that LLC." That night, I went back through Daniel's old financial documents. He had a habit of leaving things half-shredded, believing that if he destroyed the first page, the rest wouldn't matter. But buried in a manila folder in our filing cabinet, I found a partial application for a business line of credit, signed digitally by Daniel. The business? Bell Matthews Holdings, LLC. The date? 2 months ago. It was a name I didn't even recognize until I saw the signature. That's when I realized he had merged our last names to create a shell entity, probably to make any documentation look less suspicious. In his mind, this was going to be his clean exit: steal the money, transfer the house, claim irreconcilable differences, and vanish into the sunset with a new identity and a woman I had never met. I wasn't just angry. I was insulted. This man truly thought he could erase 27 years of shared life in a series of wire transfers and a text message. But he underestimated me. I didn't confront him. I didn't call or text. I stayed silent. Because every move he made was now being documented. Every login, every change of address, every account rerouting. I was building a timeline, one that no judge, no lawyer, and no bank investigator could ignore. And I was just getting started. The following morning I called Patricia. She had been my closest friend in college and was now a respected family law attorney with a reputation for handling high-asset divorces and financial misconduct cases. We hadn't spoken much in recent years, but the moment she heard my voice and the way I said his name, she understood. I explained everything: the withdrawal, the LLC, the hidden credit cards, the Arizona property listings, even the possible fake identity. She didn't interrupt, she just listened. When I was done, she asked one question: "Do you want to go public, or do you want to win?" I chose the latter. Within 48 hours, we had a plan. Patricia filed for emergency discovery access on the basis of suspected marital asset misappropriation. Quietly, no subpoenas yet, nothing that would alert Daniel. At the same time, we began compiling a comprehensive asset trail. I provided every document I had. Patricia's team traced the LLC's registration, pulled the articles of incorporation, and requested banking information tied to the business account Daniel used. The more they found, the clearer the picture became. Daniel had created an elaborate exit plan, months in the making. He used my trust, my routines, even my own advice to build the foundation of his scheme. But the irony was, in doing so, he left a trail so painfully obvious to someone like me that it bordered on arrogance. He thought I'd crumble. He thought I'd chase him, beg him to come back, fight for scraps. Instead, I built a folder, a digital vault with evidence sorted by date, time, transaction type, and corresponding email confirmations. Every screenshot, every phone record, every flagged transfer, and then I waited. I didn't just protect myself financially, I protected what little remained legally. I moved the remaining shared funds into a protected trust pending litigation. I flagged our mortgage with a third-party alert system, so any attempt to sell or refinance the house would trigger legal notification. I froze our home equity line. I notified my accountant, updated my will, and placed an emergency alert on all my credit lines. And then I called Daniel. My voice was calm. I told him I was surprised but not angry, that maybe this was for the best. I told him I was willing to work through things peacefully. I even offered to let him keep the car and the timeshare we never used. He sounded relieved. He said I didn't want it to be messy. I said I don't want that either. We ended the call on good terms. 5 minutes later, he emailed me a draft divorce agreement. It offered me 15% of our assets and zero claim to any of the LLCs. I replied, "I'll have my lawyer look it over. Thank you for being civil." Patricia nearly laughed when she read the offer. He thought I didn't know what he had taken. He thought I didn't know that he had spent years preparing to gut me financially, and he had no idea that I had already frozen everything that mattered. 2 days later, Patricia received notice that Daniel's legal counsel had been retained. Not just any lawyer, but one known for aggressive asset protection tactics. We knew then he was preparing for war. That's exactly what we wanted. Patricia filed a formal motion to obtain financial records under suspicion of fraudulent conveyance. Simultaneously, we submitted a preliminary report to the state's Financial Crimes Unit. Not an accusation, just a notification of activity that might warrant attention. I contacted a forensic accountant. She reviewed everything and confirmed what I already knew. The transfers were layered, obscured through timing and naming, but not untraceable. It was almost like Daniel knew how to move money, but not how to hide it. On paper, he looked sloppy, emotionally reactive, but in truth it was all deliberate, calculated. And so I played my part. I kept replying to his emails as if I were overwhelmed, but trying to cooperate. I told him I didn't want to involve lawyers too much, that I respected his decisions, that I appreciated the honesty. Meanwhile, Patricia was building the real case behind the curtain. A case not just for divorce, a case for financial fraud, misappropriation of marital assets, and potentially wire fraud if we found enough out-of-state transfers. I watched as Daniel grew bolder. He emailed instructions to change the deed of our home. He requested a notary signature on a power of attorney document he hoped I would blindly sign. I didn't. Instead, I signed a different document, one that revoked all previous powers and granted exclusive asset protection to my legal team. He thought I was passive. He thought I was stunned. What he didn't know was that I had already locked every door he thought he could slip through. He thought I was the same woman who trusted him to handle the taxes. He forgot I was the one who built the system that taught others how to protect themselves. He forgot that while he was planning an escape, I was building a trap, one that he was already walking into with both eyes closed. Daniel returned home the following Thursday. I had expected him to delay, to stay in Arizona longer, maybe even try to keep his distance while legal steps moved forward, but instead he walked into the house like nothing had changed. He acted almost casual, like we were two old friends working through a civil agreement. He even brought takeout from my favorite Thai place. He said he wanted to keep things friendly. I played along. I asked how his trip went. He gave vague answers, said the weather was nice and the meetings were productive. Not once did he mention Catherine. Not once did he bring up the fact that he had emptied our retirement savings or filed for divorce through his lawyer. He just smiled and said, "We're both adults. We can work this out the easy way." I told him I appreciated his maturity. Then I handed him a document I said my lawyer had drafted. It wasn't the real agreement, it was a decoy. A version that excluded all reference to fraud, made it appear as though we were amicably splitting assets, and granted him the illusion of control. He skimmed it, nodded, and said he'd review it with his lawyer. That's exactly what I wanted, because the moment he left the house, my attorney filed the real motion, one that included all evidence gathered so far, including the LLC transfers, the unauthorized account changes, and the fraudulent use of my personal financial data. We also submitted the timeline of his withdrawal activities, layered with travel records, cross-referenced with GPS metadata from shared devices. Daniel had left digital fingerprints everywhere. He had booked a hotel under a corporate name but paid with a personal card. He had logged into our joint account using a secured network from a private server registered to his so-called business partner, and he had used my social security number on a document applying for a second mortgage against a property I never consented to list. Patricia submitted all of this to the court under seal. At the same time, our financial crimes contact pushed the information to her supervisor. What had started as a divorce filing was now evolving into something bigger. But Daniel remained unaware. He thought I was playing the role he had assigned me, the stunned wife with no financial backbone. A week later, he asked to meet again. This time he brought his lawyer, a man named Edward Kane. Kane was every bit the polished legal shield Daniel thought he needed, confident, condescending, and clearly underestimating me. They sat across from Patricia and me in her office. Kane opened with a proposal. Daniel would retain ownership of the LLC and its assets, keep the car, the house, and 2/3 of the retirement funds. In exchange, I would receive a modest payout and emotional closure. Patricia said nothing. She handed Kane a folder. Inside were copies of the wire transfers, screenshots of text messages, the fake power of attorney form Daniel had sent, and a notarized affidavit from a financial investigator stating that the LLC was likely a shell created to reroute joint assets in violation of marital law. Kane's face changed. Daniel's did not. He stared at the folder as if it were blank. Patricia leaned forward. "If you'd like to amend your proposal, now would be the time." Kane looked at Daniel. Daniel said nothing. I remained silent. The meeting ended with Kane saying they would need to reassess. The next morning we received an emergency request from Daniel's legal team asking for a freeze on proceedings. That same morning a bank representative reached out confirming that several flagged transactions had been elevated to internal investigation. The net was tightening. But Daniel didn't stop. He tried again to transfer funds from a brokerage account we had opened years ago under a now inactive joint business. What he didn't realize was that I had reactivated the account a week earlier and updated the credentials. The moment he attempted access, the system flagged it and locked him out. His lawyer called Patricia demanding clarification. She calmly replied that under the marital asset protection clause in our state, all shared funds under dispute were subject to freeze pending legal review. Daniel was furious. He sent me an email that night. It was short. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. I thought we agreed to stay civil." I replied, "I agreed to stay silent while you stepped into your own mess. I never agreed to be stupid." The next day, our mortgage lender contacted me. Someone had inquired about refinancing the home, using only Daniel's information. I forwarded the inquiry to Patricia, who added it to the growing list of evidence. Then came the email from Catherine Bell. It was from a Gmail account, unsigned. "I didn't know he was still married. I thought you had already finalized things. I'm sorry." That was it. No other message, but it told me everything. She was either complicit and running scared or genuinely duped. Either way, she was backing out. 2 days later, the Financial Crimes Unit launched a formal inquiry into Bell Matthews Holdings LLC. The moment that notice was filed, our legal team moved to block all asset transfers linked to Daniel. The trap had closed, and he never saw it coming. 3 days after the formal inquiry into Bell Matthews Holdings was launched, Daniel's world began to unravel. It started with a letter from the Department of Financial Regulation, informing him that his business accounts were under investigation for potential fraudulent activity, including misrepresentation of ownership, misuse of marital funds, and attempted concealment of joint assets. Patricia received a copy, as did the court handling our divorce proceedings. His attorney, Edward Kane, tried to downplay it in a follow-up call, claiming it was just a procedural matter, nothing serious. But Patricia wasn't buying it, and neither was the investigator assigned to the case. A week later, Daniel's company placed him on administrative leave. Apparently someone from their legal department had been contacted by state investigators regarding Daniel's involvement with a business in Arizona while claiming to be exclusively contracted through his Minneapolis employer. They did not like what they heard. I got a call from his assistant the following day, asking if I had any idea what was happening because Daniel hadn't shown up to work and wasn't returning calls. I told her I couldn't speak to his schedule. She apologized. I never heard from her again. Meanwhile, the house he tried to refinance, that failed too, not just because I had locked all credit access, but because the attempted refinance used fraudulent documentation submitted through a third-party broker that was now cooperating with investigators. Everything he touched was collapsing. The LLC account was frozen. The Arizona property went unsold. Catherine Bell disappeared completely from correspondence. And now, Daniel was no longer holding the cards. The court granted an emergency motion recognizing Daniel's financial misconduct and issued a temporary asset protection order in my favor. This gave Patricia the leverage she needed to push for a full financial forensic audit under judicial oversight. During the audit, we discovered that Daniel had attempted to siphon over $200,000 into accounts under fake business expenses. He had created invoices for work never performed, claimed tax deductions on assets he didn't own, and even tried to list a luxury watch as a necessary business tool. Every lie unraveled another. His arrogance was his downfall. He thought the complexity of his web would protect him. But I had a map. I had built that map piece by piece with every question I never asked out loud, with every late-night document scan, with every silence I let stretch just long enough for him to think I was naive. I was anything but. Patricia filed charges, formal ones, with the support of the state's attorney's office and the Financial Crimes Unit. The charges ranged from fraudulent conveyance and misappropriation of marital assets to tax evasion and wire fraud. He was served during what was supposed to be a mediation session. The look on his face when the investigator handed him the envelope was not one of surprise. It was recognition. Somewhere deep down he knew this was coming. He just didn't think I would be the one to do it. His lawyer tried to shift strategy, arguing that I had manipulated him emotionally, that this was a case of marital breakdown, not criminal behavior. But the documents spoke louder than their narrative. So did the timeline. So did the evidence. At the formal hearing, Patricia presented a clear, chronological breakdown of Daniel's financial activity, complete with screenshots, timestamps, and cross-reference bank data. We had it all. The judge ordered a hold on all assets linked to Daniel pending the outcome of the investigation, and then the federal inquiry began. Turns out Daniel's misuse of funds had crossed state lines more than once. Some of the transfers into the Arizona LLC had routed through a Nevada account under a now defunct company name. That triggered jurisdiction expansion, and now federal investigators were involved. I did not gloat. I did not celebrate. I sat in the courtroom, quiet, composed, and precise, just like I had been from the beginning. When Daniel's legal team requested that I withdraw the fraud charges in exchange for a fast-track divorce settlement, Patricia simply said, "We're past negotiation." The court agreed. Within 2 months, Daniel had lost access to all personal accounts, had pending criminal charges filed in both state and federal court, and was forced to surrender his passport as a flight risk. My portion of the marital assets, what remained, was formally protected and reassigned under my sole ownership. The judge ruled that Daniel's actions constituted willful, malicious financial abuse and awarded me full control of all remaining property, including the house, investment accounts, and legal recovery rights over the funds that had been fraudulently moved. Daniel walked out of that courtroom not just with nothing, but with the looming weight of prosecution on his back. He didn't speak to me, didn't make eye contact, just walked past, shoulders stiff, face pale. I watched him go and felt nothing, not relief, not anger, just stillness, a sense that everything had realigned. I didn't win. I didn't need to. I just made sure that the truth stood, and that the lie he built collapsed under its own weight. After the legal dust settled and the court orders were finalized, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted, not broken, not bitter, just emptied out, like someone who had run a marathon without realizing they had been sprinting the whole time. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful now carried an echo of absence. But in that stillness, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Space. The space to rebuild not just physically, but emotionally. I took 2 weeks off from everything. No emails, no legal updates, no calls. Just me, a few bags of groceries, and my dog Maggie, who I had adopted from a shelter during the first wave of Daniel's absence. She had become my companion through the worst nights, and now she was my first witness to the rebuilding. I sold the timeshare, the extra car, and every piece of furniture Daniel had picked out. I wanted no reminders. I converted the guest room into an office, not for work, but for purpose. I started writing again, nothing grand, just reflections, journals, little notes to myself, memories I hadn't visited in years. Then I returned to the community college where I had once taught part-time and asked about launching a new workshop. Not just finance, something bigger. I called it Financial Survival After Betrayal. It was aimed at women like me, women who had built lives based on trust only to discover that trust can be weaponized. I expected maybe 5 or 6 women to sign up. 32 came to the first session. Some were recently divorced, some were still married but suspicious, some had lost everything and were starting over from zero. I didn't teach them like a professor, I spoke to them like a survivor. I showed them how to read bank statements, how to track digital breadcrumbs, how to freeze credit, how to build backup funds even in secret. I told them what no one told me until it was almost too late, that protecting yourself doesn't make you cold, that verifying isn't accusing, that sometimes love is real, and sometimes it's a strategy to keep you blind, and most of all, that it's not your fault if someone lies. But it is your responsibility to see clearly once the truth is revealed. The workshop grew, local non-profits reached out, I was invited to speak at conferences, someone even asked if I would write a book. I wasn't sure yet. I wasn't doing it for attention, I was doing it because it helped me feel grounded again. Helping them helped me. One evening after finishing a class, I came home to find a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. I opened it. It was from Daniel. The first communication I had received since the last court date. It was 3 pages of apologies, rationalizations, and regret. He said he never meant to hurt me, that he got caught up in wanting more, that Catherine had promised him freedom and excitement. He said he missed the stability I gave him, that I was the best thing in his life. I read the letter once, folded it carefully, and placed it in the file cabinet labelled Evidence. Then I took Maggie for a walk. The air was cool, crisp with autumn. Leaves were starting to fall. The neighbourhood was quiet, lit with porch lights and the soft hum of evening life. And in that moment, with my coat zipped up, hands in my pockets, and the leash gently tugging at my wrist, I felt it again. Stillness. But this time it wasn't empty. It was peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't come from getting revenge, but from surviving and choosing never to be blindsided again. I didn't need to forgive him. I didn't need to rage. I just needed to keep walking, and I did. The next morning I brewed my coffee like I always did. Same ceramic mug, same slow pour, same quiet routine I had followed for years, except now it no longer felt like something I did while waiting for someone to come home. It felt like mine. The ritual of solitude had become a ritual of ownership. Ownership over my mornings, my time, my choices. The sun came in through the window above the sink, casting a soft light over the kitchen countertop, where Daniel once tossed his keys and mail. That space was clean now. No clutter, no shadows. I sat down with my laptop, checked my schedule for the week, and saw a message from a former student. She had taken my workshop 6 months earlier and was now in the middle of her own divorce. Her message was short, but it hit me hard. You saved me before I even knew I needed saving. I stared at that line for a long time. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me of why all of it, the pain, the betrayal, the fight, the rebuilding, had meaning. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore, I was creating a shield for others, a roadmap, a set of warning signs and survival tools and quiet encouragement for anyone walking through the same storm I had weathered. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and looked out the window again. A neighbour walked by with their dog. A couple of teenagers rode bikes down the street. The world kept spinning, and I was still here, whole, not untouched, not unscarred, but whole. Daniel had tried to erase me from the life we built together, but in doing so he gave me something far more powerful than what he took clarity. I used to think that survival meant getting through the worst and returning to normal. Now I know better. Survival is letting the worst reshape you into someone wiser, stronger, and more untouchable than before. I didn't need a happy ending. I didn't need a dramatic victory. I just needed to keep standing, keep moving, and keep teaching others how to see what I once missed. Sometimes the best revenge is not about payback. Sometimes the best revenge is never again allowing anyone to put you in a position where you have to be saved. If you've ever been betrayed, know this. You are not broken. You are just beginning.